Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Audible, and will feature spoilers for Venom. Here's a pretty obvious observation. Different people enjoy movies for different reasons. So a few years ago, I was in film school, and I mostly enjoyed the classes, but I noticed there was a real split amongst what other students valued out of cinema. Many were obsessed with the cinematography, the visual language of film, how it all cut together. To them, dialogue, even the characters really, were more secondary concerns. It was about the technical mastery of cinematography and direction, and the emotions that those images were able to create. And I think that's perfectly fine. Really, that line of thinking has produced some incredible films. But that was never really me. I was kind of in the other group. The movies I latched onto in film school were things like Network.
Am I getting through to you, Mr. Beale?
Glengarry Glen Ross, and Kurosawa's Akira. All well-directed, good-looking movies to be sure, but more based in amazing screenplays and great performances from the actors than striking visuals. But I think it's good that there's people out there that value one set above the other, because both groups kind of bring something to the table. But what does any of that have to do with Venom? And maybe more importantly, a defense of this movie that's currently hovering at about 30% on Rotten Tomatoes? Well, I have a hunch that if you're in the first group I described, and after years of reading reviews, I know that a lot of professional movie critics are, you're not going to get much out of this goofy, weird movie. The editing is choppy, the direction is average at best, the CG is spotty, and probably most annoying to me, it's just kind of visually bleh. Like, I don't know what it is about Sony movies, but unless they're directed by David Fincher, a lot of them tend to have this really ugly, almost early digital look. So if you want to know why, at least in my opinion, there's such a huge difference between the critics and audience score for Venom, I'd chalk a lot of it up to that. On a purely technical level, Venom usually does not impress. Now, this is where I start defending the movie. And look, there's no way I'm going to compare it to Network or Kurosawa or something, obviously. But I do think in that the reviews I've read, a lot of critics are missing what I enjoyed so much about this movie. The great performances, funny script, and a tone that I think rides the line between dramatic and serious in a way that I found really interesting and kind of endearing. But I know that I'm tossing a lot out there right now, so let's get into it.
Can you get us Captain America's autograph?
Venom is a really funny movie. Now, comedy is a hard thing to touch on in video essays like this, because it's so subjective and determined by personal preference. Speaking for myself at least, I think Tom Hardy gave one of the most funny performances of the year in this movie. There's a scene in this film that, let me remind you, was marketed as some kind of badass action movie where Tom Hardy does like 90s Jim Carrey-esque physical comedy, jumps into a tank of water at a fancy restaurant, and just starts eating lobster while everyone watches on in horror. And it's really funny. I think the problem is that the marketing didn't indicate that this would be the tone of the movie at all. But Tom Hardy isn't just funny. He manages to bring a goofy likability to Brock that is missing in a lot of interpretations. When the movie starts, he's this cool Vice-style reporter on a motorcycle. But fairly early on, Eddie turns into this nervous, down-on-his-luck guy in a hoodie. It really brings him down. And it kinda does the same thing with the symbiote, introducing it as this scary alien, but eventually revealing that he's not really that either. According to him, back on his home planet, he's kind of a loser. I liked this touch a lot. It really sold the relationship between the symbiote and Eddie, and kind of brought a version of Venom to the big screen that I never expected to get. I feel like a lot of people see Venom as one of the darkest and scariest of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. And I get it, you slap that face on a t-shirt and he definitely looks meaner than like Doc Ock. And granted, there have been some interpretations of him that are just as scary as he looks. But for the most part, Venom is really goofy. Seriously, go back and actually read Lethal Protector, the comic that this movie takes most of its inspiration from, and you'll see that it literally opens on a comedic scene of Venom being a little too eager and clueless when trying to save a woman's life. That was the Venom that I like and grew up with, and I was happy and kind of surprised to see that version of him turn up in this movie. But it's not just this Venom that I enjoy. I gotta say that I liked the rest of the cast a lot too. I was expecting Anne, Brock's ex-girlfriend played by Michelle Williams, to be kind of a thankless role. And when they introduced her boyfriend Dan, played by Veep's Reed Scott, I was kind of expecting him to just be a huge douchebag. So we'd cheer as Eddie tried to win her back. But I give this script some credit here, because they didn't take the cliche easy route when they could have. Dan isn't a jerk. He's a pretty good guy who sincerely wants to help Eddie. And while Anne was initially really concerned for Eddie, I mean, look at this guy, who wouldn't be? After she found out that the symbiote wasn't going to kill him, she was actually really cool about the whole thing. She kind of embraces it. Maybe even too much, judging by that one scene. But really, by the end, she seems to view this symbiote as just Eddie's close personal friend, which I actually liked and found really surprising. These characters aren't the stock versions of themselves that I was expecting, and the cast is filled with great actors, who I'd be pretty happy to see again. So basically, I liked this cast a lot more than I was expecting to in a movie about Venom.
This classic animated adventure gives whole new meaning to the phrase costume drama.
Then there's the villain, and I'll be the first to admit that in a lot of ways there's nothing all that original about him. He's a powerful rich guy bent on owning all the symbiotes, which he thinks kind of represents the future of mankind. But I'd say that on top of that kind of stock character type, the screenwriter and especially the actor Riz Ahmed built something surprisingly compelling. When he's just pretending to be the nice, benevolent billionaire, he really sells it, and you can see why so many people in his company want to believe in him. And even when he's more overtly villainous, that charisma and that idea that you want to believe him isn't totally gone. One scene that I thought was especially well written and really well performed was when they brought in a poor test subject named Isaac to try to bond with one of the symbiotes. He was, understandably, very freaked out, and to calm him down, Carlton Drake gives this really long speech, comparing him to the biblical Isaac, who God asked Abraham to sacrifice to him in the book of Genesis. And the speech works. It's eloquent and makes Isaac feel like kind of a hero, sacrificing for the greater good. And hey, it doesn't hurt that the Bible's Isaac did survive that story. But of course, the symbiote quickly kills him and Drake is ready to move on to the next test subject. I liked that scene a lot because it sums up Drake so well. He was able to make this guy feel really special and important, like he's doing something really great for humanity, while also, when you really think about it, subtly implying that God in this scenario was Drake himself. And as the movie goes on, we learn that Carlton Drake is basically planning for the end of the world. And it becomes clear that this is exactly how he sees himself, as a godlike figure who gets to decide who survives and who doesn't. Honestly, the only big letdown with Drake, in my opinion, is the big third act battle. After he gets the Riot symbiote and they fight on the rocket, it's just kind of standard superhero movie stuff, but I think that's a problem that a lot of movies in this genre have, so I can't really single out Venom for it. Overall, is Venom a perfect movie? Obviously no. In some ways, it's kind of a mess. But I enjoyed these characters, these performances, and this weird, goofy spin on the Marvel Universe. It wasn't the Venom movie I was expecting. It was something a lot weirder and a lot goofier than that. But honestly, I think that only made me like it more. So I heard some people were kind of disappointed that Venom wasn't more of a horror movie, which personally I didn't have a problem with, but it is October. So if you're really in the mood for a horror classic, I'm gonna recommend something you've probably heard of, but maybe never actually read. Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I mean, what's there to say? This one is an all-time classic and easily one of King's best. Honestly, Audible's version of it, read by Dexter himself, Michael C. Hall, breathed entirely new life into this story for me. As someone who's always read a lot of horror, I can still say that this is one of the scariest and the most memorable. Plus, aside from that, Audible has a ton of great features. If you're not into the book, you can just swap it out, no problem. Not to mention that it has the largest collection of audiobooks out there. Another great feature is that you get a new credit to get a book with every month. So as a member, I feel like I'm constantly getting a chance to experience new books. If you want to listen to Pet Sematary or check out something else, you can get a credit to get any book you want by going to audible.com/midnight or just texting midnight to 500-500 to get started. Again, that's audible.com/midnight or just text midnight to 500-500.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started. because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.